Me to rake over the embers of this most unusual revolution are, in London, Io Johnson, a broadcaster and commentator, and an old friend of the programme, and on the telephone from the Ghanaian capital, Kwesi Jones Jr., the editor of the Accra-based The Insight newspaper. His journal has served as a bulwark of the fight against institutional corruption and has meant Mr. Pratt and The Insight have been the subject of several lawsuits, most of which, thankfully, they have so far faced down successfully. Welcome, gentlemen. Io Johnson, let me begin with you. Let's start with that word revolution, if we might. How apt is it to describe what Mr. Rajoelina and his supporters have achieved as a revolution?
Well, a revolution, wow, that's a large word. What clearly has happened is that Rajoelina has actually, a young man of 34, has been able to galvanize his people and actually been able to get a lot of support from the army, which has seen him become head of state, well, literally now. In terms of it being a revolution, I think it stems from the fact that large numbers of the population live below the poverty line. A good percentage of them don't have access to jobs. There's issues surrounding contracts that have been signed in relation to the lucrative oil and gold and a whole raft of other industries. And so it's a revolution in that sense, in terms of claiming back what they think is rightfully theirs. And also the fact that the former president had a bit of tinge of corruption surrounding him. So it would be like taking back what he thought he rightfully deserves and what the people of Madagascar probably deserve, you know. So that's where we are in terms of that.
All right, Io Johnson, I'm sure we'll touch on many of those topics as we go along. But for the moment, I'd like to cross over onto the telephone line and to Kwesi Jones Jr., the managing editor of the Insight newspaper in Accra, Ghana. Welcome to the programme, sir. Mark Ravalomanana dismissed Mr. Rajoelina as mayor of Antananarivo back in February. That's a move that lawyers have said was unconstitutional. How much do you think it fed the mood to then depose the president himself?
Well, clearly what has happened in Madagascar is unconstitutional, and it cannot be described as a revolution by any standard, because it is not about structural changes. It is not about the reconstruction of the Madagascan society. If you listen to some of the points that the new leaders are making, they are talking about the lack of foreign investment. That's not a revolutionary demand at all. It is true that there have been serious allegations of corruption against the previous regime. It is true that unemployment is rising in Madagascar. It is true that the national wealth has not been equitably distributed. It is true that there's a lot of discontent in Madagascar. But it doesn't make this a revolutionary situation. It doesn't make the new administration revolutionary by any standard. What has happened is simply a coup d'etat, and it ought to be seen as such.
Right. Now, Mr. Jones, Madagascar is a rainbow nation, and obviously Mr. Rajoelina, I believe, comes from the Indian community or has roots there. How much is he going to be able to sustain support outside Antananarivo itself, where he was mayor? Does he actually enjoy popular support across the whole of the island, a very large island? Mr. Pratt?
Yeah.
Did you hear that question? Yes, did you catch the question, sir? I fear not.
Yeah.
Io Johnson, did you get the question?
I think your question is surrounding how much popularity does Mr. Rajoelina actually command on the small island. I think he does, clearly. The fact that large swathes of the army are supporting him, the fact that large numbers of people have actually come onto the streets to support him. But we've got to be cautious here. Clearly, Mr. Ravalomanana has large numbers of people who support him otherwise, because we've seen clearly within the last 24 hours people taking to the streets, condemning the action, asking for him to come back, asking for rule of law to be implemented and for the constitution to be brought back into its full closure. But in saying that, clearly Rajoelina does command some level of popularity, but also he needs to command respect internationally, and that's where he's failing. Large numbers of countries do not respect him. His inauguration recently was condemned. In fact, large numbers of diplomats did not attend, and of course we've got the African Union and the SADC, the regional party, criticizing him heavily. In fact, Nigeria has been very vocal on this, and so has Algeria and so many other countries. So his popularity, I'm afraid, locally maybe, internationally definitely not. And he's going to struggle seriously, and if he's not careful, I could see serious sanctions being imposed on him personally and the people around him.
Okay, Kwesi Pratt, tell me, so far as that international condemnation is concerned, can he do without international support? And if he can, for how long?
Well, if you see that one of the main grievances is that there's a lack of foreign investment, then the logic of the regime itself is that it needs international support. And it doesn't seem to me that this new regime would garner any international support. It is true that it appears to have a lot of local support, but that local support itself is contingent upon the economic and social problems in Madagascar being resolved. And I don't see this regime being able to resolve those problems. You see similar situations in Ghana and elsewhere, where new regimes have had popular support, and in a matter of a year, that popular support has dwindled completely. I can predict the same situation for Madagascar, because the new leaders do not seem to have a clue as to how to resolve the social and economic problems confronting the people of Madagascar.
Mr. Pratt, Mr. Manana accuses Mr. Rajoelina and his supporters of using what he calls terror tactics and repression. How legitimate are those claims?
Well, the previous regime certainly did use methods which were clearly not acceptable. And the involvement of the army and the use of brute force to consolidate power by the new regime is also clearly not acceptable. What has happened is not a renewal of constitutional mandate, or is not assumption of power based on the mandate of the people. It is the army which is playing a central role in Madagascan politics today. And I think that that clearly is unacceptable. You know, the days when the military was not subordinated to political authority and decided the fate of nations, those days are over. And it's about time that the new regime and their backers recognize that.
Thank you, sir. Ayo Johnson.